The Snowman. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know, where the treetops glisten and children listen to hear sleigh bells in the snow. Because of what happened, I can't hear that song without it sending a shiver down my spine. Every Christmas, every winter, as soon as the first flakes begin to fall, I start to feel the fear. Every Christmas it plays, and every time it does, I'm transported back 30 years to my childhood, to one particular Christmas when I was 7 years old. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Mom had said as she opened my bedroom door that morning, and I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes. "Look out the window. See what happened last night?" I threw back the covers, jumped out of bed, and ran to the window. Pulling open the curtains, I was almost dazzled by the brilliant blanket of white on the ground. Snow was everywhere, on the trees, and on the rooftops of our neighbors' homes like white fluffy balls of cotton candy. "Snow, Mom. Can I go play?" "After breakfast. It's cold outside, and besides, there's plenty of time. That snow's not going anywhere soon." At the breakfast table, I began to gobble down my cereal as quickly as I could. "Don't eat too fast," said Mom. "You'll get indigestion." "Yes, Mom," I said, chewing my food more slowly. "Where's Dad?" "He's outside shoveling the yard for old Widow Peterson. We don't want her breaking her hip again." "You want a snowball fight, Squirt?" said Henry, my older brother. "Sure. You two kids go easy. I don't want any windows broken this time," said Mom. Yeah, said Henry. "Or bones," said Mom, wagging a finger at Henry. "You forget you're 5 years older sometimes. You play too rough. I'll be gentle with you. Won't I, Squirt?" said Henry, grabbing me in a tight bear hug and squeezing me so hard I thought my cereal and juice was going to come back up. "Go on, Scoot. But no more than 30 minutes. We're going to Grandma's today, remember?" said Mom, as Henry let go of me and I wheezed a few breaths and staggered after him. Outside, Henry was busy arming himself. As soon as I came through the door, he was waiting, and I felt a hard whack to the side of my head and a ringing in my ears as icy shards of snow fell down my collar. "Huh. Better learn to duck, Squirt," shouted Henry and picked up another snowball. "Hey, no fair," I said. "You better run," said Henry, and I ran, trying to scrape the snow out of my collar as another snowball whacked me in the small of my back. I bent over and scooped snow and turned to throw back at Henry, but as soon as I drew back my arm, another snowball hit me in the chest, and I dropped the snowball. As I bent down, I felt another whack on my leg. "I'm not ready, Henry. You're not playing fair. Not playing fair," Henry mimicked in a whiny voice and threw another. "Henry, stop it," I shouted as Dad walked down our driveway towards the yard. "What's all the screaming?" yelled Dad, shovel resting on his shoulder. "Nothing, Dad. Just getting in a little target practice," said Henry and pitched a straight snowball at me. I turned, and it hit me on the shoulder. "Nice action, Henry," said Dad. "That's some pitching arm. But your brother just stands there like a sissy. You can't miss." "Dad," I said, "I'll quit whining, son. Can't you boys play something a little less rough?" said Mom from the doorway. "What's wrong with playing rough?" said Dad. "I don't want my kids growing up sissies. Does it always have to be rough? Can't they play something gentle?" Dad, can we build a snowman?" I said. "Snowmen suck," said Henry. "Henry," said Mom. "They do. It's for babies." "You want to build a snowman?" said Dad, looking at me. "I guess," I said sheepishly. "I ain't playing no baby stuff," said Henry with a huff and ran indoors past Mom. Dad picked up the shovel and began to follow when Mom called out to him. "Come on, Stan. He's just a kid. He needs to grow up," said Dad. "He's 7 years old." "Jesus, Ruth." "Okay," said Dad wearily, resting the snow shovel against the garage. My heart leapt with joy. "I'll show you how. You start with a tiny snowball," said Dad, scooping up a handful of snow and patting it into a ball as I stood there watching him, my smile beaming. He then dropped the ball in the snow and rolled it. As it rolled along, it picked up more snow and began to grow. "You try it, kid." I knelt down in the snow, feeling the crunch beneath my knees, and pushed the ball as it grew from a baseball to a basketball to a watermelon to a Halloween pumpkin. "Good work, kid. That's the body. Now we just need a head." I scooped snow in my hands enthusiastically, patted it into a ball just like Dad showed me, and dropped it. I then rolled it in the snow and watched it grow. That'll do it, said Dad and stooped down to pick up the head. He placed it on top of the bigger snowball body. Now we just need some eyes, a nose, and a hat. Dad went inside and I stood, shivering slightly, looking at the blank white face of the snowman. Dad returned with a carrot, 2 stale Oreo cookies, and one of Grandpa's old hats. Don't go catching a cold, said Mom from the doorway, as I stood shivering in the snow. You cold, kid? Said Dad as he pushed 2 sticks into Frosty's sides for arms. Yeah, yes, Dad, I said, my teeth chattering. This ain't cold, kid. In Korea, we had privates die on sentry duty. Just froze to death. Solid. Took a week to thaw out the bodies just so's we could put them in a coffin, he said. I saw a mental picture in my head of men with arms frozen solid in unnatural positions. Stan, what have I told you about telling the kid war stories? I don't want him having nightmares. Jesus, Ruth, he's gotta know someday. War's hell, and that's the truth. I been there, said Dad, shaking his head. Somebody had to go over there and put those commie bastards in the ground where they belonged. Stanley, not in front of the children. Hush your mouth, woman, and get back to your laundry. Why you? What? You got something to say about it, Ruth? Said Dad, stepping forward. But Mom just slammed the door and went inside. Damn women. What do they know about it, huh? They ain't never been knee-deep in dead gooks, he said with a huff. The moment passed and Dad busied himself decorating the snowman. There, that ought to do it, he said as he stuck the carrot and cookies into the snowman face and set the battered old fedora on top. What shall we call him? Frosty, I said with glee. Okay, you two, time to come in and get changed. I told Grandma we'd be there by 10, said Mom. Come on, kid, said Dad, ruffling my hair, and I trotted after him into the house. We spent most of the day at Grandma's, sat in the living room, with the heat turned up full and the TV on top volume as she watched her soaps. Henry got so bored he began pinching me and wouldn't stop until Mom intervened. By the time we got home, it was almost dark. Mom, can I play outside? It's too dark. Besides, it's time for dinner. But I want to play with Frosty. He's a goddamn snowman, kid. He ain't going anywhere. You can mess around in the yard tomorrow, said Dad. Mom, I whined. No, and that's the end to it, she said sternly. We ate dinner in silence. All I could think of was Frosty, as I pushed my food from one side of the plate to the other. Chicken, potato, and peas. I hated peas. After, as Mom washed the dishes, I began to feel hungry. Mom, I'm hungry. You just ate dinner, said Mom. And you wasted half of it, said Dad, picking his teeth with a wooden toothpick. I don't like peas, Dad. I don't like peas, mocked Henry. Henry, don't tease your brother, said Mom. Why not? Said Henry. You're mollycoddling that kid Ruth, said Dad, the toothpick bobbing up and down in the corner of his mouth. Stan, it's true. When I was a kid, we'd be lucky to get dinner, Dad said, turning his eyes on me. Your grandpa had to work 2 jobs just to feed us all, and if we didn't finish what was on our plate, he'd take the strap to us. There was no I don't like peas. Kids today have it easy, get everything you want, and even then it's never enough. Do you know how hard I have to work to put food on the table? But I'm hungry, Dad. Then you shoulda eaten your peas. Mom, can I have some cookies and milk? It's too late to eat, said Mom. It's almost your bedtime. I'm hungry. Mom looked at Dad. Do what you want, Ruth. But I tell you, you're ruining that kid. Just some Oreos and some milk. You could always eat Frosty's eyes, said Henry, pretending to scoop out his own eyeballs and eat them. Yummy, yummy. Henry, said Mom and slapped his arm. Ow, Mom. Come on, Henry. Let's watch TV, said Dad, throwing the toothpick in the trash as he and Henry left the kitchen. Mom, can I watch TV too? No, dear. It's your bedtime, she said, handing me the glass of milk and a plate with 2 cookies. Why doesn't Henry have to go to bed? He's older, dear. It's not fair. You'll understand when you're older. Come on, eat your cookies. And then it's time to brush your teeth. I ate the cookies and drank the milk, and Mom walked me to the bathroom to brush my teeth. As we passed the living room, Henry was sat on the sofa next to Dad watching TV, the lights flickering and sending shadows dancing across the hallway floor. More than anything, I wanted to be sat next to Dad. I didn't even care about the TV. I brushed my teeth and put on my pajamas, and Mom tucked me into bed. Can I have the night light, Mom? Aren't you a bit old for that now, honey? Please, Mom. Okay, she said, and switched on the little blue canary night light. Night, night, said Mom and waved as she closed the door. Mom, I called as she disappeared from sight. Yes, dear, she said, poking her head back through the door. Can you leave the door open? Just a crack? Okay, just a crack. Night, 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 Mom. I lay there in bed, unable to sleep. As I stared up at the ceiling, I thought how much it looked like the yard, blanketed in snow. I wanted to be outside, hearing it scrunch and feeling it beneath my feet. I wanted to see Frosty. Eventually, I threw back the cover and went to the window. In the yard, stood there in the snow was Frosty. The snow seemed to glisten in the moonlight, and Frosty was stood there looking at me, his arms two sticks, at the jaunty angle Dad had set them, his carrot nose not quite straight, the old scarf blowing in the nighttime breeze, and the battered fedora at his feet knocked off by the wind. Good night, Frosty, I said as my breath condensed on the cold glass. I went back to bed, but try as I might, I could not drift off to sleep. I was too excited. I couldn't wait for morning to get dressed in my warmest clothes and return to the yard and see Frosty. He looked cold out there in the yard, with the wind blowing. I imagined talking to him, laughing and sharing some milk and cookies. I wanted to see him one more time before I went to sleep. I got up from the bed again to check. I looked out at the snow-covered lawn and something looked different. I thought at first it was a trick of the light. I could have sworn that we put Frosty further back in the yard. I shook my head and blinked as my breath again condensed on the cold glass. In the condensation, I traced with a finger, Frosty. I rubbed the window with my hand and smeared the condensation and closed the curtain. I felt chilly and began to shiver, so I went back to bed. But I couldn't sleep. Something was bothering me. I threw back the cover and again went to the window. What I saw made me freeze in surprise. There was Frosty, no more than 6 feet from the window. My breath again condensed on the window, and this time, where before I'd written Frosty, were now the words, "Come out to play." Startled, I ran back to my bed and dived under the covers. I shivered under my blanket. I couldn't understand why I felt so cold. I thought about getting another blanket, but then I began to feel afraid. I felt something, some presence, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I lay statue still, trying to slow my breathing, and my heart, which in the still of the night, sounded as loud as a drum in my ears. I couldn't explain it, but I felt a menacing presence. My eyes were wide open with fear, searching the room for the source of the threat, flicking left and right, wildly. Then I heard a low hissing sound. "Andy, come out to play." Slowly the window began to creak open. The wind blew the curtain to one side, and there, framed in the moonlight, was Frosty, and where the Oreo cookies had once been were 2 red burning circles that pulsed and flickered. I screamed and screamed until I was hoarse. "Mom, Mom." "What's wrong, honey?" said Mom as she threw on the light switch, wrapping her dressing gown around her. "What's the racket?" yelled Dad, tying the robe around his waist with the belt. Mom pulled back the covers and I leapt into her arms. "What's wrong, honey? Bad dream? Frosty, hee. Why is the damn window open? You know how much it costs to heat this house," said Dad as the curtain billowed in the icy wind. "Frosty, he moved. He was? What did you mean moved? He's a goddamn snowman. He can't move," said Dad, walking to the window and slamming it shut as I flinched. "See, he's there in the yard right where we left him." I was still sobbing in Mom's arms. "I told you you're spoiling that kid, Ruth. He's turning into a sissy. He's a child, Stan. And if you didn't tell him stories about dead soldiers, he wouldn't have nightmares." "You're blaming me," said Dad, jabbing his chest with his finger. "You're the one raising our kid as a sissy." At that I cried even more. "Don't call him that. Can't you see what you're doing to him? What I'm doing? Jesus, listen to yourself, Ruth. I'll stay with him. Go to bed, Stan. You've been eating too late before bed." "I told you it gives you nightmares," said Dad with a shrug. Mom sat with me, stroking my hair, gently rocking and singing in a low voice. After 10 minutes, when I had quietened down, she lay me back in my bed and tucked me under the covers. "Mom, can I sleep with you and Dad?" "No, dear. You know your father won't allow that. You're a big boy now." "Mom, I'm scared." "You don't need to be scared, honey. There's nothing to be scared of. I'll leave the door open and the night light is on. Try to get some sleep. You've got school tomorrow." I lay there looking at the white ceiling and could almost see the snowflakes fall. I gave a shiver, not through cold, but from the sheer thought of the snow. I closed my eyes and tried to think of something else. My cars and G.I. Joe figures, playing stickball in the park and baseball cards. Slowly my mind began to drift and I was approaching a peaceful slumber when I heard something. Scrunch. My eyes shot open and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Scrunch. There it was again. I gripped the edge of my blanket tightly. Scrunch. Then it stopped. I lay there, my ears straining waiting for the next crunch. Several moments passed, and I began to wonder if my ears were playing tricks on me. Slowly, gently, I pulled back the blanket. I took 2 tentative breaths, swung my legs carefully to the ground, and stood on the cold hardwood floor. With short, hesitant steps I crept toward the window. I wanted to know for sure, to see what I expected to see, what I needed to see. The snowman stood just where we left him. I held the edge of the curtain for a few seconds, the air cool around my feet as I started to shiver. I took a deep breath and pulled back the curtain a tiny crack and peered out of the window. There in the yard stood Frosty, as still as could be. I was about to let go of the curtain when I suddenly noticed something. Holes in the snow, side by side. Holes that looked exactly like footprints. Then I saw a blur of movement. I jumped back, the curtain still held tight in my hand, ripping it off the rail as I fell backwards with a high-pitched scream. There in the window was a face, pressed against the glass, roaring at me. I heard Mom shout and come running down the hall, Dad following her shouting, "What in the hell is going on? Henry, what are you doing? Stop that!" Mom yelled through the window at him as Henry still roared at the window, smearing snow into the glass. I just sat there on the floor, frozen in fear, the curtain clutched to my chest. "Are you okay, Andy?" Mom asked, but I couldn't get my breath to reply. "Henry, get your ass in here now," shouted Dad, angry as hell. "Yes, Dad," came the muffled reply from outside. "Jesus, what have you done to the curtain?" said Dad. "This is ruined. Do you know how much this curtain pole cost?" "You've ripped the bolts out of the wall," he said, examining the plaster. "Damn kids and your stupid games." Next morning, I sat at the breakfast table pushing my Cheerios around the bowl. Henry was pulling faces trying to get my attention. Then finally, when that failed to work, he flicked my ear. "Ow, cut it out, Henry." "What's up, squirt?" he said and flicked me again. "Ow, Mom." "Henry, stop it, will you?" Henry pulled a face, but stopped flicking me. Frosty the Snowman was a very happy soul. Henry began to sing. "Stop it, Henry," said Mom. "Frosty the Snowman, la la la," he continued. "Shut your mouth, Henry," I said angry, clenching my fists below the table. "Henry, that's enough." "Geez, Mom, I'm only teasing." I said that's enough, Henry. "Andy, hurry up and finish your breakfast, honey. It's nearly time to go. You don't want to be late for the school bus." "Not hungry," I said. "What's wrong? Are you still tired from last night?" "I'm fine, Mom, just not hungry." "You need to eat to keep your strength up till lunchtime. Have you got your lunch money?" "Yes, Mom." "Okay, go brush your teeth." I brushed my teeth listlessly. Truth be told, I was dead tired. I hadn't slept a wink that night. The whole time I was terrified to close my eyes, keeping them fixed on the window. As I ran my toothbrush under the faucet, the ice-cool water brought a chill down my spine. I looked in the mirror at my reflection, noticing the dark rings. I brushed up and down a couple more times and was about to spit when I noticed something move behind me in the mirror. "Boo!" Henry shouted and jumped up behind me, waving his arms. I jumped with fright and screamed, my knee connecting heavily with the base of the sink. "Got you," said Henry and raced back to the hall. "Kids, I'm leaving in 5 minutes. You better be ready." "Yes, Mom," whined Henry. "Let's hope your father salted the driveway this morning, so we don't break our necks on the ice." I finished dressing and stood on the porch, wearing my duffel coat, mittens, and woolly hat. "There, that's better," said Mom as she straightened it, then spat on her hanky and rubbed my face. "You've got toothpaste on your cheek, honey." The wind was icy cold, and I looked down at the snow in the yard. "Come on, kids, we're late." "Let's not miss the school bus," said Mom, and began walking down the freshly salted garden path, dragging me along by my arm. I limped slightly as I walked, the pain in my knee still fresh. What's wrong, honey? Why are you limping? I hurt my knee, Mom. You boys and your roughhouse games, she sighed. Come on, we've got to get moving. I looked down the street, still covered in the blanket of white snow. Apart from the odd shovel driveway and path, it was completely covered. As I walked along the sidewalk, the snow crunched under my feet, making the exact same sound I'd heard last night. I watched my feet make tracks in the snow, just like the ones I'd seen the night before. Come on, honey, we're late. We need to move faster, said Mom, jerking my hand, and I looked up and saw it. The hairs on my neck stood up as we passed the McGregor's yard. It was stood there tall and proud, and as we passed it, I could swear it was looking right at me, right into my eyes. 2 pieces of black coal instead of the red orbs of flame that Frosty had, but I still felt my stomach lurch. My legs gave way and I stumbled. Jesus, what's with you today? Sorry, Mom, I said as she pulled me back on my feet. Henry, don't wander off too far. Yes, Mom, and watch the road. I got back to my feet and Mom brushed the snow off me. Come on. I followed on jelly legs, looking back over my shoulder at the McGregor's snowman, still feeling the cold black eyes watching me. Before we hit the end of the street, we passed 4 more snowmen. I closed my eyes as we passed each one, clutching Mom's hand tight and saying a silent prayer. At the end of the street, we waited on the corner of the main road for the school bus. I was shivering. You okay, Andy? You're shivering. I'm okay, Mom. Keep your scarf on, okay? Even on the bus, they drive with the windows open, so they don't steam up. Yes, Mom. I stammered through a mouth of chattering teeth. Where's that bus? Mom said absently, looking at her watch. It's coming, Mom, said Henry. Okay, have a good day, honey, said Mom as she waved me and Henry onto the bus. Look after your brother, Henry. Yes, Mom, said Henry, rolling his eyes and putting a hand on my shoulder as he waved Mom goodbye through the window. As soon as the bus pulled away from the curb, he turned and hissed, Don't even think about getting in my face, Squirt. You cramp my style and I'll set Frosty on you. A shiver ran down my spine as I gulped and nodded. Late again, huh? Said Mrs. Thorndyke, the math teacher, as I came into class. Sorry, Mrs. Thorndyke, I stammered, looking past her. In the schoolyard stood a huge snowman. Take a tardy slip and sit down, she said sternly. Yes, Mrs. Thorndyke. So, as we see here, she said, writing it on the board, 1 times 3 is equal to 3. 2 times 3 is equal to 6. 3 times 3 is equal to 9. Can anybody pick this up from here? Hands were thrown up alongside multiple yelps of, me, me, me. Robinson, please step forward to the board, said Mrs. Thorndyke as Les Robinson sauntered up to the board with a beaming teacher's pet smile and took the marker pen. Soon the pen was squealing on the whiteboard. 6 times 3 is equal to 18. 7 times 3 is equal to 21. 8 times 3 is equal to 24. I had already zoned out, my eyes drawn to the snowman in the yard. I did a double take. I could have sworn that it was now nearer the classroom. I shook my head, closed my eyes, and opened them. Are you following the board, Andy? Said Mrs. Thorndyke, and my head snapped back towards the sound of her voice. Are you with us? Sleeping is for nighttime, and daydreaming is forbidden within these 4 walls, she said as the class tittered with nervous laughter. Robinson, you may continue with 7 times table, she said with a nod as the pen resumed its squealing. 1 times 7 is equal to 7. 2 times 7 is equal to 14. 3 times 7 is equal to 21. But like a magnet, my eyes were drawn back to the figure in the yard. As they focused on it again, it seemed to have appeared at least 10 feet nearer the class. Then the head seemed to tilt upwards slightly, and the red eyes flashed like fire. Andy, come out to play. I flinched and knocked my metal pencil case to the ground, which clattered on the solid floor with an indecent clang. Everybody looked round at me. Sorry, I said. Would you like to finish the exercise? Said Mrs. Thorndyke. No, ma'am, I said, and Robinson's pen resumed squealing. 7 times 9 is equal to 63. 8 times 9 is equal to 72. 9 times 9 is equal to 81. 10 times 9 is equal to 90. Thank you, Robinson. That night I lay awake, too scared to sleep. Every shadow, every movement, my ears were primed for every sound, every creak of a floorboard, every noise outside the window. Every nerve was on edge. It's an old saying, but the quickest way to fall asleep is to try and stay awake. Now I know how interstate truck drivers and traveling salesmen fall asleep at the wheel. Somehow I fell asleep. The next thing I knew, I heard the scrunching of the snow. I wasn't sure if I was awake or dreaming, but I heard that sound and my blood froze. I lay there shivering, statue still, my eyes fixed on the window. The sound stopped, but I couldn't take my eyes off the window. I lay there, gripping the edge of the blanket in silent terror for several minutes. Then I heard footsteps and my muscles tensed even further. I saw the flicker of light emerge under the door and to my relief heard the noise of the toilet seat being lifted and the watery trickle as Dad peed. Then the flush of the toilet, the wash basin taps, and finally the click of the light switch as Dad's footsteps retreated. Somehow the distraction had eased my mind slightly. Somehow, I fell asleep again, until I woke once more with a start. Scrunch, scrunch, scrunch. My eyes leapt to the window and I froze again. Behind the curtain, outside the window, I could see a shadowy outline and two glowing red eyes. Slowly the window opened and an icy cold gust of wind blew the curtain open. My eyes went wide in shock and I opened my mouth to scream, but I couldn't make any sound come out. Frosty climbed over the windowsill as the wind howled past, freezing me to the bone. I shivered, clutching the blanket as the slow, scrunching footsteps carried Frosty towards me, the demon-red evil eyes burning like fire. He crept towards my bed, his feet leaving wet marks on the floor and his mouth yawned open to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. The mouth opened wider and hissed, "Andy, come out, to play." He crept further towards the bed and the breath stopped in my lungs as he reached up for the blanket, with clawed, icy hands and lifted it up. The eyes burned hotter and redder as they focused on me, and again it hissed, "Andy, come out, to play." And the icy clawed hand reached out for me and gripped my pajamas. Suddenly I screamed, "Andy, Andy." The next thing I knew, I was awake and Mom was shaking me as Dad emerged through the doorway. "What's the commotion?" "It's Andy," said Mom, worry in her voice. "Frosty, Frosty," I mumbled, as Mom threw back my blanket and I threw my arms around her. "Oh, Andy, you're all wet. What happened?" "Jesus, Andy," said Dad, disgust in his voice. "You're way too old to be pissing the bed. What in the hell's the matter with you?" "Frosty," I cried. "Ah, Christ, Ruth, he must be sleepwalking. He's pissed all over the floor too," said Dad, noticing several wet pools. "That's it. We're taking him to a doctor. He's scared. He's just a child. He's a goddamned sissy, Ruth. You've made him a sissy with all your mollycoddling." "How dare you?" hissed Mom. "How can you say that about your own child? It's true, even if you're too blind to see it. If you'd let me go to Harry when he screamed that night, he might." Mom stopped herself mid-sentence. "Might what, Ruth? Go on, say it." "Finish your sentence," said Dad, standing over Mom, goading her. "Say it, Ruth," he hissed, prodding her with his finger. "Stan, you're scaring Andy," she said, hugging me tighter. "Henry, go back to your room, honey. It's all right," she said, noticing Henry in the doorway. "You heard your mom, Henry. Get back to your damn room." Yes, Pa," Henry stammered. "You'll take the kid to the doctor, Ruth. Tomorrow, first thing." "No kid of mine is going to be a bedwetting sissy," he said and stomped back to bed. Mom just held me and rocked me until I fell asleep. In the doctor's office, Mom flicked through a home decor magazine as I sat on the chair swinging my legs. But I could tell it was just a prop to mask her nervousness. Her eyes were glazed over, so much so that the receptionist had to call our name twice. "Mrs. Peterson?" "Huh," said Mom, finally snapping to. "Mrs. Peterson? You can go through now. The doctor will see you." Mom put down the magazine and picked up her purse. We knocked on the door and walked into the doctor's office. "Mrs. Peterson, please sit down," the doctor said, gesturing to a chair. "What can we do for you today?" "It's my son." "Yes." "Well, it's delicate. I can assure you, ma'am, in my long experience, I've seen and heard almost everything. Well, he's been having nightmares and just recently, you see, he's begun wetting the bed. She finally got the words out and went a deep shade of red at the confession. Seeing her embarrassment made me feel all the more embarrassed, and I kicked my legs wildly as I sat on the edge of the seat, looking at the floor. I see, said the doctor, clearing his throat. Perfectly normal, Mrs. Peterson. Many children have temporary episodes of infantile incontinence. They tend to grow out of it very quickly, exactly the same as they do with nightmares. It's extremely common, nothing to be ashamed of, I assure you. Well, it's just, he seems so terrified. Beyond what you'd expect from a bad dream. There is something called night terrors, Mrs. Peterson. Extremely vivid dreams that can seem as real can be. Truly terrifying. But again, they tend to pass quickly. Has young Andy suffered any kind of trauma recently? Any kind of emotional trigger you can think of? Sometimes these episodes can be triggered by even the most trivial of events. He wakes up screaming and he's wet the bed. I'm terrified because, you see, we had a child, Harry. He died. I'm sorry, Mrs. Peterson. It was infant death syndrome. Because of that, well, I can understand your anxiety, Mrs. Peterson, but IDS is an extremely rare condition. There's nothing in your son's sleep problem that could cause that kind of issue, especially at such a mature age. I noted the words the doctor used to describe what was happening to me. Sleep problems sounded so trivial. Is there anything you can do for Andy? She asked, stroking my head as I looked at the floor, swinging my legs. Psychotherapy or counseling can be helpful in many cases. It can be helpful to improve the amount and quality of sleep which the child is getting. In some cases, we may prescribe benzodiazepines or tricyclic antidepressants. Could you do that? Well, Mrs. Peterson, medication is only recommended in extreme cases. I just don't know what to do with him, doctor. It's getting worse. That night as Mom began to clear the plates after dinner, I was dreading my bedtime. I could see Frosty outside in the yard, from the kitchen window, watching me. Can't I watch TV with Dad and Henry? No, you can't, said Dad. It's your bedtime. But Dad, you keep telling me to be a man. I should have a later bedtime if I'm a man. Don't smart-mouth me, kid, unless you want my belt across your ass, Dad said with a menacing look. Come on, Andy, said Mom, pulling out my chair. Time for bed. We're all very tired, she said with a glance in Dad's direction. Dad didn't acknowledge her. He just kept chewing his food. I washed and brushed my teeth as Mom turned down my bed. My eyes were locked on the mirror, so I could see anything that might try and sneak up on me from behind. I brushed and spat without looking down, too afraid to look away from the mirror. Oh, Andy, you've got toothpaste all over the floor, said Mom, noticing the small puddle of toothpaste spit by my feet. She cleaned it up with some kitchen towel as I rinsed and dried my face. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, young man, she said, the familiar tinge of disappointment in her voice. She tucked me in, but I didn't want her to leave. Mom, I need the nightlight. Okay, she said, and turned on the little bluebird nightlight. Good night, sweetheart, she said, planting a kiss on my forehead, and turned to leave. Mom, yes, honey, can you read me a story? I said, as I heard Dad's footsteps bound up the hall. Andy, a story, Dad said, poking his head through the door. Are you some kind of goddamned baby? And what the hell is this nightlight doing in here? I thought I told you he was too old for it, Ruth, Dad said, turning on Mom. Stan, he's only 7. Only 7? I was running 3 paper rounds when I was 7. 1 before school and 2 after. Don't give me that he's a baby crap, Ruth. Stan nothing. You treat him like a baby, he'll stay a baby his whole damn life, Ruth, said Dad, ripping the night light out of the wall socket and flouncing back down the hall. Leave the kid to sleep, he said, over his shoulder. Mom turned and left wordlessly. I turned over and sobbed into my pillow. I cried for nearly 10 minutes until the pillow was soaked and my eyes stung with the tears and an empty loneliness filled my chest. Then suddenly I remembered where I was. Alone, in my room. The curtains were drawn and the door was closed, but a small light from out in the hallway seeped beneath the door. I lay looking at the white ceiling, and immediately I was thinking of Frosty. I tried to block the image of his demonic face from my mind, the horrific red glowing eyes that burned like the fires of hell. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but as soon as I closed my eyes, the fear increased. What if I opened my eyes and Frosty was stood there, looking at me? Maybe he was already in the room? I started to shallow breathe, too scared to make even the slightest of noise. My mouth was dry, and I started to feel cold, unnaturally cold. I was scared to open my eyes, but also scared to keep them shut. Slowly I opened them. I scanned the room, my eyes adjusting to the low light. The room was empty except for my chest of drawers, my toys on top, the chair and desk by the wall, and my closet. I peered around the room, my eyes scanning left to right. Then something caught my attention and they flicked back to the right. My closet door. It was open, just a crack, but it was open. I racked my brain to remember when I'd last opened it. Had I closed it properly? Had Mom opened it to check for blankets? Was it a draft? Then I saw what I thought was a shadow. My breathing stopped and my pulse drummed in my ears. The shadow seemed to be moving. Then I realized it was coming through the gap in the curtains. It was only the tree branches swaying in the moonlight breeze. I took a deep breath and lay back on my pillow, exhausted. Then I started to drift off to sleep. Scrunch. My eyes shot open and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Scrunch. There it was again. I gripped the edge of my blanket tightly. Scrunch. The noise stopped just outside the window. Then after what felt like an eternity, came the slow screech of the window being opened. The curtain billowed in the gust of wind that rushed into the room, and even despite my every muscle being set like stone, I couldn't help but shiver. The curtains were parted by a white snowy clawed hand, and I saw the legs come over the windowsill and step onto the floor. "Andy," hissed the voice, and the red eyes flickered. "Andy, come out, to play." Frosty took a step, then another, then another. He came nearer and nearer the bed. I tried to scream, but no sound would come. I'd lost all control of my voice, paralyzed in fear. The distance closed to almost nothing and the mouth opened. The moist fangs glistened in the half-light and the clawed hand reached out for me. "Andy, come out to play." Suddenly it was as if a dam broke, and my throat gave a piercing scream and the claws touched my skin and I thrashed on the bed, screaming. Suddenly the door burst open and the light flew on. Mom was kneeling by my bedside, shaking me and screaming, "Andy! Andy! Stan! Please help me! God!" I was barely conscious as Dad thundered into the room. "What in hell? Stan, he's having some kind of fit. Help me." I felt Dad's powerful hands around my arms pinning me down. "Jesus," said Dad, the familiar sound of disgust in his voice. "He's pissed himself again. Frosty." I groaned. I was looking up at Dad, still unsure if I was dreaming or not. "I told you, Ruth. I told you 1,000 times. You mollycoddle the kid. He becomes a bedwetting sissy. What did I tell you? Stan, look at him. This is our child. He's play acting. He's not. He's scared stiff. Look at him. Because of you, Ruth. You made the kid a mommy's boy sissy." He turned and stomped down the hall. "Stan, where are you going?" "I'm gonna deal with that damn snowman once and for all," he said. Mom just sat there with me on her lap, hugging me and rocking as I shivered. Outside, we heard the shed door open and the clang of metal on concrete as Dad took out his snow shovel. Then the shed door slammed shut. Scared of a goddamn snowman, I heard Dad muttering and then his scrunching footsteps in the snow. Then I heard a grunt and a clang, and then a cry, and a thump. "Stan," Mom called. No answer came. "Stan," she said louder. "Stan? Are you okay, Stan?" I looked at Mom and Mom looked at me, eyes wide. Suddenly the room had become icy cold and we both began to shiver. After several seconds, Mom lay me down on the bed. "Stay here, Andy," she said and moved slowly toward the window. With a sweep, she pulled back the curtain and cried out, "Stan!" and rushed from the room. As she raced down the hallway, her bare feet thudding on the wooden floor, she kept screaming, "Stanley! Stanley!" I got up from the bed, shivering and my eyes misted with tears. Gingerly, I moved to the window, the curtain still half open. I heard a voice behind me. "Andy? What is it?" said Henry as he came to the window. "Dad." I saw Mom race across the snow on bare feet and rush to my father's side as he lay flat on the icy ground, his snow shovel buried in Frosty's head. "Stan, talk to me, Stan," she shouted, then leaned her head against his chest for a second. Then came a blood-curdling scream. "Somebody help me, please." The paramedics arrived in less than 15 minutes. In less than 20, they'd taken my father away. Heart attack, they'd said. Nothing anybody could have done. At the wake, Mom just sat and rocked. Henry cried. I couldn't cry. The huge lump of grief just sat in my stomach like ice-cold lead. When we returned home, Mom went straight to bed. Henry took off on his bike, and I stood at the kitchen window looking out into the yard. There stood Frosty, Dad's snow shovel still embedded in his head. I looked at Frosty, still and frozen in the yard, exactly where Dad and I had made him just a few days before. Just a few days before, when Dad had still been alive. I could still see the impression of Dad's prone body and the footprints of the paramedics in the snow. I began to cry, just a few sobs at first, but then the tears flowed freely. I wiped my eyes with the backs of my hands and looked up at the snowman again, the carrot nose missing and the two Oreo eyes divided by the blade of Dad's snow shovel. I stood there looking, through tear-misted eyes, and then suddenly my heart froze as Frosty's two eyes glowed red. I jumped with affright and ran for my bed and jumped under the covers, not emerging for hours. That night I put myself to bed. Mom still hadn't emerged. I lay awake as long as I could with the light on until exhausted. I fell asleep. Suddenly I awoke with a start. The room was pitch black, even though I had fallen asleep with the light on. In my head I heard the words of the song. Frosty the Snowman is a fairy tale, they say. He was made of snow, but the children know he came to life one day. Then I heard the noise again, as sure as anything. Crunch. I froze and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Crunch. There it was again. I gripped the edge of my blanket tightly. Crunch. Andy. I felt the warm wetness in my pajamas and I turned and sobbed into my pillow. After several days, the snow began to melt and Frosty ended up a small muddy puddle, surrounded by Grandpa's old hat, the ragged scarf, moldy carrot, and Dad's snow shovel. We never cleared the yard. Within a month, the house had been sold and Mom had movers pack all our stuff and ship it to our new home in Milwaukee. The years passed by. School, college, work. Mom died 5 years back, cancer. Henry moved to Oregon and only stayed in contact by Christmas card. The same message every year. To him, it was just a joke. Merry Christmas, Squirt. Don't let Frosty get ya. Ha ha. Henry. Frosty the Snowman is a fairy tale, they say. He was made of snow, but the children know he came to life one day. It's Christmas again, and I'm with my wife shopping. She points to a store. We walk in, and the heat hits me immediately, like walking into an oven. They always rack the heating up to 11 during Christmas. And of course, the music is playing. Jingle Bells morphs into Old King Wenceslas. Already I'm sweating, and the back of my neck is becoming itchy. I'm becoming anxious and irritable, and barely paying attention to the items my wife is pointing out to me. Are you okay? She asks. I'm fine, I reply, tugging at the roll-neck sweater. Old King Wenceslas morphs into Deck the Halls, and I'm becoming claustrophobic from the heat, the swarms of people, and the noise. Deck the Halls begins to fade into Let It Snow, and I start to feel the bile rise in my stomach. My wife is showing me a perfume gift selection, and I'm nodding as she shakes her head. Then I hear the first bars of White Christmas, and I feel the panic grow in me. I need to get out. I drop my coat and race for the exit. Outside, I double over and dry heave by the store exit. I look up to see a security guard looking at me closely, probably suspecting me of being a shoplifter. But he sees me doubled over and shakes his head and walks away, as suddenly my wife appears by my side. Are you okay? What happened? I'm fine. I just needed some air. Drink some water, she says and began fishing in her purse. Thanks, I say as she takes the top off the bottle and hands it to me. I take a large gulp. It's probably the heat. I've seen women pass out in Christmas sales, she says. I drive us home, and as we unload the car, it begins snowing again. In the street, a group of kids are throwing snowballs. Then, I hear those dreaded words once again. Let's build a snowman.